Love yourself. Strive for progress, not perfection. Know your worth, then act tax. Make an income while making an impact. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. Visualize your higher self and start showing up as that. Level up. Hi guys, and welcome to a brand new episode of Level Up with Lou, with your girl Lou Oni. And this is the podcast where we help you live your best life, pursue your dreams, and love yourself. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I know I've been churning out a lot of content recently, so I'm so glad you guys support the content and you continue listening, and you're back again for a new episode. Guys, I'm so excited for this episode. Today I have got a fellow podcaster. I've got Luke here in the building with me. Luke is a podcaster from Canada, and he hosts 3 podcasts, including a podcast called The Perfect Pod, which is about manhood and masculinity. His intention is to discuss it more intentionally and purposefully, and he wants to build generations of people, especially men, who have a deep and healthy love for themselves and others. He hopes to leave listeners with the knowledge that there is no one-size-fits-all idea of masculinity. And in today's podcast, Luke is here to talk about manhood and self-help and what it's like to be a content creator and why it's important for men to share their vulnerabilities. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Luke. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I am so excited to be here with you, Lou, today. I'm jealous I don't have a British accent, but maybe your audience will think I have a good Canadian accent. People tell me they can hear the boots. I don't say that. I say about. So we'll see what everyone says. But yeah, I'm excited to be here.
That is awesome. No, honestly, I've had quite a few Canadians on the show recently, and it's just been really cool to, connect with people from there, because I have listeners from there, but I just never really knew anyone from there. So it's been really cool to meet people from all over the world, and especially from Canada as well. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show. One thing I always like to ask my guests is for them to share their personal growth journey. So what is your personal growth journey been like, and what encouraged you to start podcasting?
My personal growth journey. I have been pretty self-aware throughout the course of my life, and in high school I was admittedly not a hard worker. I never did homework. I still did decently well. University, I still didn't do homework. I very rarely went to class in first and second year. But I would say that I started to see more self-growth in myself and a desire for it around that third year mark. I started to read a little bit more business books, self-help books. And to the point now in 2021, I set 21 goals for myself and made a contract for each one and assigned an accountability partner for each one too. So there's 21 things that I got going on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, to things that I thought would improve and increase the quality of my life. And all through reading books like Atomic Habits, which I think you and I have had a conversation about before. I don't know if we did, maybe we didn't. But Atomic Habits, a great book. And just reading some different books like Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss, that he's got a lot of leadership books in there, and he asks people about routines and self-help there. So it's been a lot of ingesting of other people's thoughts about self-growth and self-improvement, and then figuring out which ones work for me and then applying them in a way that works for me as well.
That is awesome. And I know also that you are a host of 3 different podcasts, and you're someone that quite enjoys podcasting. What is it about podcasting that really sticks out for you?
Yeah. So, right. This was your question about how did I get into podcasting too. So in third year of university, I was the residence life don, or RA. I don't know what they call it around the world, but basically I was an upper year student living on a floor with first year students to help them transition into their first year experience at university. And it was my first like real leadership role. I had 21 students, 15 guys, 6 girls. And it was one of the first times that I really showed my true colors when it came to being vulnerable and authentic. I really believe in leading with vulnerability and using it as a tool for success. So kind of
Mm.
update to when I was graduating in April of 2019, I knew I was about to head into the workplace, and I knew all these ideas and concepts about the workplace, saying things like, when you get into your job, stay away from politics, stay away from really hard conversations, because keep that all out of your, it can just kind of confuse and potentially create toxic or unhealthy environments in the workplace. And I've always loved those types of conversations. So where was I going to have them if I couldn't have them in the classroom anymore, and if I wasn't allowed to have them at work, where could I have them? The only real thought process that followed up with that was I should start a podcast. I love talking to people. I love getting one-on-one conversations, have always been my favorite type of conversations. And so I just started with one back in October of 2019. And based off of that dawning story, that RA story, I found it really hard my entire life to be friends with guys. I found it really hard to build relationships with them. I felt a little bit more mature in some of my early days about being authentic, being vulnerable. And when it came to that leadership role, I realized that there's guys like me on the more emotional, maybe sensitive, more emotionally mature, and then there's other guys at the other end of the spectrum who are all about fitness and working out and getting women. But I learned to not judge them in those moments, and I learned that almost every guy, no matter how much they want to hide it, always, it's the emotional guys that struggle with getting fit and seeing that as a valuable asset in life, and it's the guys who are really fit and hard to, don't really find getting in tune with their emotions very helpful, that need to learn from the guys on the other end of the spectrum. So my goal with the podcast has always been to bring those two together, and it just seemed like a very good fit after that leadership role. That masculinity and manhood, especially for young men, was where I wanted to go with the podcast, and discussing
Mm.
it in a really intentional way, because you hear the term toxic masculinity or kill all men, and a lot of men are confused about this anger that comes at them, right? And
Yeah.
that was, to me, something I just wanted to have conversations about, so that's where it started.
Wow, I think that is awesome what you're doing, because I feel like it's definitely a need to have a platform, a space where men can feel comfortable enough to share their vulnerabilities and to feel like they don't have to be a certain type of way. Because I know, like, even like seeing the men, the boys around me growing up, I knew there was kind of like an expectation for men to kind of, when they say act like a man, or like, be tough and don't show emotions, like that was kind of like the expectation. But I feel like, especially even now in 2021, we all know that there's different ways to be a man, and part of being a man should be, being able to lead with vulnerability, someone that shows vulnerability, and someone that is okay in their manhood and masculinity, that they don't feel like doing certain things makes them girly, or makes them soft, as people would say. I know you were homeschooled until grade 9. I don't know what age that is over here, because I can't remember the conversion.
About 14.
How do you feel like that shaped you as a man today?
So looking back on it, I actually think it helped a ton. I never really heard the terms "boys will be boys" or was able to excuse rude behavior towards women as just liking them. Like, I didn't have a lot of those moments that maybe get passed off in the school systems or in educational systems that are embedded in men from young age. I do remember being called like too sensitive by people in my family, and I also had two. I was the youngest of four, so I had two older sisters and an older brother, and I think that helped a lot with the characterization of who I am, and learning the problems that young women go through and experiences. I've always been open and talking about, like, I was kind of told from a young age women have different bodies and they go through periods, and I never found it like a really weird conversation to have in high school. And I remember a lot of guys, whenever people would talk about periods, they would like giggle at it and laugh at it. I'm like, I don't really get that. That's something I don't remember a lot about
Mm.
understanding, was those kind of ideas of gender differences and laughing at them or finding them childish. I also think it helped a lot with my curiosity. I remember being the youngest of four and doing schoolwork with three older siblings. You learn a lot more through just osmosis. Like my brother's 6 years older and he's doing math in grade 8 while I'm in grade 2. I remember being like soaking in some of that knowledge. So in terms of my thought processes, I think that was helped from it. But yeah, I don't really remember hearing a lot of these phrases about kind of like the identity politics. I don't think that was even a thing 10 years ago too much, but I definitely don't remember hearing boys will be boys. I remember being allowed
Mm.
to play on the street, like road hockey. And when cars came by, I remember playing with older guys and younger guys. And I don't know if that's unique to homeschooling, but I do think it provided me with a very unique experience of not having a lot of these ideas ingrained into me from a young age.
That that kind of is quite interesting to think about, because whenever I've thought about someone that is homeschooled, I've always seen, or I've something I've always noticed about homeschooled or people or children is that they're quite confident in themselves and self assured, and because obviously I know like in schools and things like you're quite influenced by your friends and the people around you, but I feel like when you're at home, your socializing is quite different because you're not exposed to like all the like the peer pressure and the bullying and the kind of the social expectations of how to fit in, or even like the perceived like hierarchy of like I don't know, you guys have it in Canada, like the whole the jock, or the cheerleader or the nerd and all those kind of things. That doesn't really happen when you're homeschooled, and you're more able to kind of be free and be yourself and kind of learn at your own pace, and um really build that strong relationship with whoever's homeschooling you, and just really be yourself. I know as well that you're someone that likes to lead with vulnerability, but is there a time where you felt like you weren't able to do that, and how did you overcome that?
Mm. Well, first I wanted to touch on the a little bit about what you said about homeschooling. Is so I was I played sports, so I still had that kind of modeling, but yeah, I wasn't really bullied too much. And when I went to high school, I remember like, wow, some people are just dicks, and I was like, who like, when did people get this mean? When did people become like this? And because it wasn't really my experiences as a young person, that those were feelings that I went through. And my mom has always told us from a young age, like, use your words. My dad is much more um authentic himself, and not really afraid to be judged. And it's interesting that you say that homeschooled kids are more self-assured, and from based off your experiences, because if I look at my family too, I would say the same thing. Is we don't have a lot of questions, or it seems like we question ourselves a lot less than other friends who have been like through the public system told that maybe they can be one thing or another. And in my family, I don't know if it's a parenting thing, I don't know if it's a lack of being in homeschool thing, but we definitely haven't um, been through a lot of the same experiences when it comes to like self-doubt than other people. So that's an interesting, I'm gonna have to think about that one a little bit more, about that, if it's because people tell me I'm self-assured a lot. So and normally in a negative tone, I don't want to be arrogant, but I definitely am confident in myself and my abilities. um, but going to your question about leading with vulnerability, have I ever felt like I've not been able to do that? um Interesting. Uh, I don't know if I ever felt like I haven't been able to. I definitely feel like I've put pressure on myself to not. So I don't think anyone's ever told me you can't do it this way. But I don't know if this is just me, but there's a weird feeling I get when I feel like I have to say something. So I was in like my heart will beat out of my chest. Like it will pound and I have to say it. And if I don't say it, like my heart will be down, but I'll think about it for the rest of the day. But there's times in class when I was in university where I literally just could feel my heart pounding, and I'm like, I have to say what's on my heart. Like I could feel it on my heart. And I know people say that that's just a phrase, like this is on my heart right now. I could literally feel things on my heart. And I remember my first day of that job as a residence assistant with the first year students, and leading that first meeting. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I didn't really prep anything. There's like a guideline that you have to go through. But I remember telling them on the first day, listen, my first year experience was horrible, absolutely dog shit. My community didn't like each other. My RA there was absent a lot of the time, and I just communicated with them honestly about my first year experience, and I said I will do everything. The reason I became what I am today and I'm on this floor is because I will do everything in my power to make sure that you don't have the same first year experience that I did. And I remember there being a group of them, two or three of them, that really heard that and took the reins for the rest of the year and making sure that that wasn't the community experience that they had. And I remember the last day I sat down with a couple of the like quote unquote leaders of the floor, the ones that really brought people together. And they were doing checkouts, and all three of them told me, I remember that first day when you said that your first experience was awful, and that he's like, you really put the onus on us to make sure that this wasn't going to be a bad year, and that we were aware of the problems that might arise, and that we didn't have those surface in our experience. And so through leading with vulnerability, I mean, you have to tell people what the common problems are so that they find themselves aware of when that problem might arise. You have to put the ownership on them and say, listen, I'm going to do everything I can, but I need you to also do everything that you can to make sure that you all don't have this experience, because I can tell you it will haunt you if you have a bad experience in first year. And yeah, just two or three of them took it on. And that is my anecdote for why I think everyone should lead with vulnerability, is because of my own personal experiences with it. And ever since then, I've never questioned taking that approach. And if I feel like I'm being silenced with that style and approach, then I really don't have interest in being there.
Earlier we did talk a bit about your things that you wanted to develop in this year. So the 21 things that you wanted to work on and improve on this year. Can you share with us something that you feel like you'd like to see the biggest development in this year, and some steps you've taken so far to accomplish this?
So it's interesting. Some of them, well, a lot of people, and what I've done in the past is I have approached goals with this end goal in mind. Like if you're trying to lose weight, you lose 40 pounds in a year, right? Or whatever it is, or 10 pounds, 20 pounds, you try to get to a certain limit. And I've realized that that's never worked for me, because as soon as I see that I'm not going to hit that goal, then I stop, I quit. I'm like, well, the goal that I set for myself isn't going to happen, so I'm just going to stop. What I did instead is focused on doing day-to-day tasks that allow me to get better at what I'm doing, so that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I hit the goal. And it's not really so much about hitting that goal, but it's about becoming better in that process, in that activity, in that task. So for me, really my overall approach is to, one, build processes. That's my main goal, is to build processes and habits that stick around for a long time. And it's not really about one or two specific ones. It's more about, as a collective, am I optimizing my time? Am I getting better as a person? Am I doing what needs to be done so that in 3, 4, 5 years from now, it's actually easier to do this and set a goal because of what I've done today? So that is a big one. But really the largest in terms of the overall things that I've done is, one was I wanted to take walks every day. And it's the only, well, it's one of the few ones that I've been able to actually follow through on every single day. And it's like changed my, it's changed my approach to a lot of things, and I take it every day after work day, so that right after work I can go for a walk. Doesn't have to be a hour long walk. It can be anything from like 15 minutes to, if I'm feeling it, sometimes I've walked for an hour and a half that day. So it really doesn't matter. I just want to get outside, and I found that when I come back, my mental approach to, like, I separate work and the podcast work much better than I used to, because I used to sit at the same desk every day during COVID, 16 hours a day, going from work and then going to the podcast. I'm like, this isn't healthy. So when I take that break and I come back, I feel much more, I feel much better and at ease, and mentally cleared and focused from taking that mental break. And I also find it like my meditation. It's my time to self-reflect. It's my time to think back to a lot of the things, and what I want for the future, dreams, goals, aspirations. I think that the daily walk will be the thing that sticks around and the biggest impact. That's me 2 months into this. So I think that so far has been the biggest impact, and I'm already seeing the effects of it today.
I can completely relate with that. Because when I was in therapy earlier last year, one of the things my therapist suggested was taking a walk home after work. Because so I work in the hospitals, and obviously it's been quite a stressful time with COVID. And he was like, just walk home if you can, or try and get off the bus early, or try and incorporate some walking into your journey back home to kind of help you, de-stress and kind of separate, work from home, because I was finding it quite difficult to unplug from work and stop thinking about work and my patients at work. So I can completely relate with that. Um, as a podcaster, I can completely relate with feeling like, you know, you're working endlessly. So like as we're even recording, I've literally just come back straight from work and I've gone straight into podcasting. And sometimes it can feel like a lot. But in terms of podcasting, what's something you wish you knew before you started that you'd like give like as advice to someone to start doing, or don't do?
It's interesting because I'm in a podcasting fellowship right now that it's like an 8-week boot camp about podcasting. I've helped a couple friends currently and in the past months start their own podcasts. The one kind of piece of advice is, it is hard. It takes way more time than people think.
Yeah.
It takes a ton of practice. You will hate your voice at the start of it. Like literally, I remember editing the first couple episodes and I'm like, I hate the sound of my own voice. I hate the sound of
Yeah.
my own voice. I hate the sound of my own voice. I've gotten way more comfortable with it. But
Yeah.
it's a long, for me anyways, it's a long-term thing. If you get obsessed with the numbers, you will fail. Podcasts, there's so
Mm,
many podcasts now. It's so hard to get indexed on podcasts sites high, especially with all the celebrities and famous people and YouTubers and creators who are starting their own podcasts, already have their own fan bases. Like, appreciate every listen that you get, appreciate every person that
mm,
tunes in. And for me, I'm in it for the long haul. My why I keep going is my why is rooted in something more powerful than the numbers itself. And I think that's a really
yeah.
important mentality for a lot of podcasters to take, is because it's a hustle. It is. I've been doing it a year
Mm,
and a half, and it doesn't get easier. It gets better, and you learn a lot of tips and tricks and how to improve. But as soon as you get better at one thing, that just means that now you have more time to do something else that will help you grow. So
yeah.
yeah, that would be my advice, is try to
Mm.
optimize time, try to optimize efficiency, and stay rooted in your why. Don't look at the numbers too much.
Completely agree with what you said. Yeah, it is hard work, but I think one of the things is just being consistent in whatever it is you're doing, and as you said, understanding why you're doing it. Because I feel like when you don't know why you're doing something, it makes it difficult to carry on doing it. And even just that, like sometimes even if like you just get cool one listens, two listens, three listens here, just think about who you're actually impacting. Think about those listeners are actual people. Like someone has actually listened to what I've done and they've gained something from it. And I think that is amazing when you can create content that actually relates to people, that motivates people, that encourages people in whatever walk of life they're going through. And you also touched on the fact that there's
Hmm.
like celebrities, influencers, famous people creating podcasts now, which now makes it difficult because then they already have an audience they're coming with, and their podcast can grow exponentially. How have you dealt with that comparison that comes with creating content?
Well, first off, yeah, tune in and appreciate the people that actually listen. I got a text from a friend earlier this week saying how my podcast has changed his life. Like he feels so much more comfortable being vulnerable as a man, showing himself as an individual. And I'm like, man, I haven't even taken that much away from my own podcast. I'm the one running it. Like sometimes I don't. You will make a larger impact. Whether it's sometimes I think like, wow, I thought that episode sucked in my own head, but this is the episode that's impacted the most people. Or wow, this is one that
Mm,
really impacted me and it impacts no one else. So just release every episode too. Do whatever you can to have everyone hear whatever you hear, because it's who knows who's going to be affected. Going to the content creation side of it, at the beginning I really struggled with comparison, and not because you with the thing with podcast analytics is you never know who's really where unless they show you. You just kind of assume, and what
yeah.
looks good is different to compared to what division or theme or genre you're in. But really, I think there's a statistic out there: if you're getting more than like 500 listeners to it, or if you're getting more than 1,000 listeners per episode, you're in the top 1% of podcasts. So think about that. 99% of people are not in the are not getting more than 1,000 listens. That is a
Mm,
huge, like, at least that's what I think. I'm not sure if it's changed recently, but like if you're getting more than 100 listens in the first on per episode, you're already in the top 50%. So comparison, not many people are huge as big in podcasting as you think. We look at the Joe Rogans, we look at the celebrities, and we're like, that's what I aspire to be. Man, it took Joe Rogan 12 years or whatever it is now to get to where he's at, if not more. And
yeah.
he started off with not many, and he started off with a pretty big name. So the people I knew when they first started podcasts were like pretty big influencers on LinkedIn, and they already had, and they worked up a large reputation. They worked up a large pool of guests, and but it was still a years long process for them. And you can either choose to be jealous of them, or you can choose to be motivated by it.
Mm,
And for me, I you know I take inspiration from other creators. I take influence from them, but I'm not them. And I would rather be me and grow slowly than try to and then not be me and grow fast, because longevity is through being yourself. And when I look at a lot of these creators, yeah, it's really easy to get jealous, but you're also comparing where they are to where they were. Like, or you're only comparing where they are to where you are. And a lot of these people that are
yeah.
famous on YouTube or famous on and have podcasts that they started after The Bachelor or Lonely Island or whatever, all these different reality TV shows, like it was a process for them too, and it's a process for you,
Exactly.
it will take some time. It will take some time. So
Yeah.
just stay rooted in it, and choose to be motivated by them rather than to be envious of them.
You're right. Something that like came up to mind is I can't remember what it is, but there's this I don't know if it's a koi or something I saw somewhere where people, obviously we compare ourselves to people's highlight reels. So in terms of like we're comparing ourselves to when it all looks good, when it's all polished and amazing, and we kind of forget the journey that it took to actually get there. In terms of like, for example, like as you said, people have been in this, you know content creating and influencing field, whatever. They've been in that for years and years, and they put in work into that. And yes, you're seeing the fruits of their labor, and you're seeing, their podcast grow, but you don't know how long it took for them to get to that. You don't know how many hours of time, how much effort they've put into whatever they're doing. And as you said, I think it's really important to not be intimidated by that, and to not be envious of that, but to actually be motivated and inspired by it, to know that it is possible to get to ultimately where you want to get to, and to kind of stay in your own lane in terms of, don't try and be everyone else, because I feel like when you're trying to copy what someone else is doing, it just doesn't come across right. But when you're truly authentically being yourself, that's where you thrive the most, and that's where you can make the most impact. We touched on earlier about self-doubt, not really in depth, but we kind of talked about the fact that you felt like you were quite self-assured because of the, I don't know if it's because of the way you were brought up or just your experiences. But in terms of content creation and self-doubt, do you have any tips you can share with people that may struggle to, feel like they should put out content and feel like people will actually care about what they have to say?
Yeah, for me, I honestly feel like self-assurance has always been part of my life. I don't think it was raised in me. I was taught from a young age to be humble, and I've always struggled with it, you know. I think I'm pretty awesome. I think most people in life are pretty awesome, and I like to think of myself as not having any limits, and I definitely don't put limits on myself. And it's like a snowball effect too. Once you start creating, this will feed into the second part of your question. Once you start creating, you realize actually how much potential and how much confidence you have. Like it is a snowball effect, and it's why people stay grounded in depression sometimes, is because it's been like thing after thing after thing that took their confidence down. It also works in reverse. Thing after thing after thing can build you up. And self doubt. Wow, I remember the summer I was. So this is my story in terms of starting and releasing my first episode. I held myself accountable by starting an Instagram page about it. And I did a countdown of like 9, 10 day countdown. I forget. And every day I posted like a 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 until like the very first episode. So I started an Instagram page and announced it to people so that I had a following and I had people like holding me accountable. Okay, this first episode has to be released here. And the first time I hit record on a podcast, I didn't know what the I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had so much self-doubt with in terms of the topic, you know, masculinity and manhood, and sharing my vulnerabilities with it. I mean, I didn't have self-doubt expressing that to people in my life, but I had self-doubt expressing that to people on the internet.
Mm.
And now everyone's going to know things that are going on, and I still go through this because I know my parents listen to my podcast, and I tell things on my podcast that I've never said to my parents, conversations I've never had. And it can cause a little bit of weirdness there, but I've gotten a lot more confident in sharing those parts of myself now, knowing that my parents aren't going to bring it up, or if they do, they bring it up in a better manner than they might have 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I feel comfortable and confident in myself that that information is out there. So self-doubt, yeah, that first episode, I probably recorded it like 3 times, and it was like, I don't know if I actually want this out there. I've all, you know, the topic of masculinity is one that is so heavy in society right now, even so since when I started. And it's one of those topics
Mm.
that you never know if someone's going to come out of the blue and just cancel you one day with all the anger and outrage that's in social media. And so I always try to take a really empathetic approach to every conversation. I do have challenging conversations about traditional masculinity, toxic masculinity, about sex, drugs, violence. I've had conversations on domestic abuse. And there's a lot of things I like to cover because I'm just really interested in the topic. And yeah, it's just self doubt is a part of life, and I've kind of always felt that, you know, this is one of my mantras: if you don't love yourself, nobody else will. And that's not from an egotistical sense. That's not from a, of course, people will love you even though you don't love yourself. Like, of course. It's more from the sense of if you don't love yourself, you won't appreciate and value the love fully, the value and love that other people have for you. And once you love yourself, people that say I love you, you can accept it, embrace it, and understand it. And I don't think, because I know people that have a lot of love in their lives, but since they have their own issues and mental health and things that they're going through, they don't value that love that is in their life, and they kind of take it for granted.
Mm.
I don't really take the love. I don't, at least I don't think I do. I don't think I take the love for granted, because I do love myself, and I'm like, yeah, I understand why you could love me, because I'm at a place now where I also love myself.
Hmm. Wow, that is incredible. Um, as you were even just talking, I was just thinking about how men are towards other men, in terms of like showing love and being vulnerable and being emotionally open. Do you feel like the gender critiques and like he's a mummy's boy, or he's a softie, or like the stereotypes kind of condition men not to value emotional openness?
I think so. I think it is a problem. I think it's over embellished in society, to be honest. Um, you know, for me, I don't think I'm a mama's boy, but I was called sensitive, and I never really took it to heart. I never really thought, okay, well, I'm a human. I have emotions. Like, no shit. That's kind of how I've always thought about it. But when it comes to being emotional and vulnerable in my life, I've honestly had more pushback from the women in my life than the men. And because when you think about it, it's men who are open with other men. It's like, okay, this is a different experience. Like, I wish I had this freedom that you have in your life to be this open with other men. Like, they almost, there's almost like an envy there. I don't think I've ever been told you're too much of a sissy or much of that nature that
Mm.
I can remember from other men. But I do remember being shut down for being sensitive and emotional from either female friends or from other women in my life. And I think one thing that we have to talk about a little bit more in society is a lot of men do feel questioned by
Mm.
their manliness from women in their life when it comes to them opening up. And that there is a level of vulnerability that isn't accepted, that is almost
Mm.
unattractive to some women, whether they come off as needy or codependent, or too much of like a sissy, like they wouldn't be able to handle tough situations in the family. There is a stress there that I don't think society talks about enough, that there's accountability on women and men and gender non confining to understand the impacts that they have on other people and other people in their lives. And that is something that, it's not an easy conversation to have, but it is one that needs to exist, because I know a lot of guys who've been like, oh, I've been in a past relationship, and my girlfriend like totally shut me down whenever I tried to be anything but manly, and anything, if I was too vulnerable, she'd call me out on it, and then she'd gaslight me in the
Mm.
future. So a lot of men don't open up because sometimes they don't trust the women that they're with. And the guys, I know of guys who have also been shut down by other guys. It's not something I can personally speak to, but that's a huge maturity on the men thing. But even with my guy friends, like I have a really good group of guy friends, and we're all pretty emotional and open with each other and vulnerable with each other. Not all the time, but I'd say a good 20% of the time we're having like real conversations about life and hurt and pain and breakups and remorse and guilt and shame. So yeah, I definitely think it's almost over embellished in society how much men don't open up. And I also feel like we're putting too
Mm.
much pressure on one side, when from everything I've seen and I've read, is there's a lot of accountability that women have to take in this shutting down of men's emotions. And there's also, I also am aware that men gaslight women and call them too emotional for like the most minute thing. So I'm not saying it doesn't go backwards. there is a lot of accountability on men to be better men in that respect. There also has to be more accountability, I
Mm.
think, towards women in allowing them their men, not just their boyfriends, not just their partners, allowing men other than them to open up and be vulnerable in society too. It's pretty easy to support your partner, or it should be pretty easy to support your partner. Support other men in your life too.
No, I guess I've never really thought about it from like the male perspective in terms of like how women actually contribute to this, problem that we have in society. And even as a nurse, I've not think I've noticed is that so when I was working on the surgical wards, I noticed that like sometimes men would come in with problems that they'd had for a long time, but they didn't want to come into hospital or, go and see a doctor for it. Or even when it comes to like mental health, I felt like a lot of men were struggling with like, their mental health, but they weren't seeking the help that, they needed. Um, do you feel like the expectations that society places on men to be men and kind of do things for themselves causes this? And how do you think society can help men to seek the help they need in terms of their emotional or mental health, or even like their physical health? So, like doing their checkups and, going to see the doctor when they
Mm-hmm.
have issues.
Yeah, it is a huge issue. I think the number one demographic for suicide is middle-aged men between like the ages of 30 and 60. And they attempt suicide less, but um they are quote unquote successful more. I don't know of a good way to put that, but like a lot of men, and it's because they choose more violent ways of suicide attempts. And it is a huge problem in society that men, whether it comes from like, yeah, I can think of sports as being a contributing factor to this, man up, power through it, toughen up, you're not in pain. And a lot of that comes from sports and the mentality that you'll do everything it takes to win. So there is a huge battle there when it comes to men being more risk adverse and not checking up on their health and not getting the help that they need. And when it comes to the mental aspect of it, I started going to therapy this year for just for the sake of it. Like, I don't think I have any mental health issues or problems. I never have, but I was just like, let me try out. It's in my benefits under my work plan. I get a couple meetings with the therapist, so like, why not try it? And it's been helpful so far. Like, I don't think it's anything new. I just think it's someone else to talk to who is trained to ask and probe for questions. So, when it comes to creating a society that allows men to do that, one thing I would say is don't underestimate the power and influence of male only spaces. You see it a lot in society that, get rid of locker room talk, get rid of a lot of these male dominated spaces or male only spaces because they're not equity and they're not equitable and fair and inclusive. Get rid of the toxic stuff for sure. Get rid of like the locker room talk that is problematic and sexist and misogynistic for sure. Don't get rid of male dominated spaces. Create healthy new spaces, whether that's a men's circle, whether that's a men's group at your local church, whether that's a men's group that goes out to the wilderness for a weekend or a week, and you take like your father and your son. Like those are really popular in North America from what I've seen. Make healthy male communities popular is really like it. Don't make it just about men going to like a gentleman's club and with a cigar and a drink. Like that's not healthy. I would be like, yeah, that's a male space that maybe isn't useful to society. But when it comes to those other circles, let men have friends. The number one reason for suicide among men, from what I've seen, is that they don't have male friends when they're older. And it's a lot of
Hmm.
the times it can be men's fault. They get into a relationship, they kind of leave their guy friends in the dust, and then all their guy friends become their wife's friends' husbands. But then there's nothing really rooted there in a real relationship. So
Hmm.
if you're in a relationship, encourage your boyfriend and partner and guy to have male relationships. Let them go out with the boys, let them go out and do those things. I don't care really if you have trust issues. That's a you thing. Let the guy go out and have these experiences and these moments, because those are really important for his future health, for his future
Yeah.
relationships, and in the relationship that you have. Another one is, we can try to talk about the destigmatization of therapy all we want. I think the main way of doing it is to have people go out in society, like really popular and influential people, and say, I went to therapy. And that's the only way guys are going to listen, is if there's like a direct influence in their life that tells them that they went through it and they did it. That's one of the reasons I'm doing it, is
Mm.
because I want to be an influence on other people and want to say that, yeah, I have done it. I have tried and I found it helpful. So we can talk about the statistics all we want, but men will ignore those until someone they respect says to them, I did therapy and I think you should look into it too. I think it's
Yeah.
helpful, and it should be something that you try to check out. So those would be kind of the things, is really the importance of male spaces and men's spaces, and encouraging them to go to those men's spaces that are healthy, not toxic ones. And then also people that they respect doing um, doing therapy as a way to open up about going to therapy.
That is amazing. One thing I always like my guests to do is leave the listeners with a thought or some words of inspiration or anything they want to kind of impart on them. Is there anything you'd like to say to people listening?
I think my last podcast guest said this at the end of the podcast, but it's basically love yourself. And I'm not stealing his quotes, but I'm stealing his ideas. Because I think that is a fundamental part of who you are. And with self love comes self kindness, self awareness, accountability, and a lot of the things that come with pushing yourself and self growth, which is the theme of your show. And I think that that's really important. If you love yourself, you'll call yourself out on your bullshit. If you love yourself, you will learn to love the others and accept the love of others in your life. If you love yourself, you will understand your why a lot more, and it will keep you going with your podcast. It will keep you going with whatever you're doing. It will allow you to not care about other people's numbers. It will allow you to be like, one day, I'm done with podcasting, I'm going to go do something else. It will allow you to just do that. Love yourself more than the value of other people's opinions. And I think you've unlocked the key to life, and you'll stop putting the pressure on yourself to perform to other people's. This is one thing I say. My expectations of myself are higher than anyone else's expectations of me. Like, and if you believe that, and it's a lot of pressure I put on myself to be great. It's a lot of pressure I put on myself to grow, to be the person that I think I can be. But it also means I hold almost no one else's opinion in front of mine. Like, my biggest
Mm,
fear is not being able to accomplish what I set my mind to accomplish, and to be as good as I think I can be. So, and that again is rooted in that self-love aspect. So love yourself first, and you'll be able to appreciate the love that other people have for you.
I love that. Honestly, because I say that a lot. So I'm glad that you've actually said that, because it is such a theme of the podcast, a lot, in terms of like loving yourself and growing and being accountable towards yourself. Thank you so much for coming on this episode. I really enjoyed this. I wish we had more time, but I know you're quite busy, so I really do appreciate your time. If my audience want to connect with you and just learn more about your podcast and your journey, how can they reach you?
Yes, I have an email, luke at theimperfectpod.com. My podcast, The Imperfect Pod, it is about discussing masculinity and manhood more intentionally and purposefully. No one size fits all idea of masculinity. I've had conversations with rape survivors, about gendered violence, with prisoners, ex-felons, sex addiction, porn stars, anything under the sun that you think encapsulates masculinity. I've probably had it. There's still a couple more topics that I want to go really in depth on, but it's wide. You'll hear a lot of my thoughts and opinions there. And Instagram at the Imperfect Pod. It's where I post a lot of short clippets, quotes, and themes from the podcast as well, if you want like micro-sized content. So my email, Instagram, and my podcast are the three best ways. And I now have a newsletter too. So if you go to theimperfectpod.com, there will be something that will sign you up for a newsletter. And I try to pump out one a month. It's not too much yet. Hopefully to get to 2 a month soon. But those are the best ways to reach me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you so much, Lou. I appreciate it. I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of Level Up with Lou. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any comments or questions, email me at levelupwithlou@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.